am Jane Pacheco, and this is a story about my mother, my grandmother, and me. It's my grandmother up there on the left. Her name was Martha Grziak, or Jeshak, depending on who you ask. She was her mother's 13th and final child, born in Detroit just before the Great Depression. Her mother only spoke Polish. She didn't read, write, and she only sent Martha to school when social services came around knocking at the door. Then when my grandma went to school, she only made it to the 8th grade. And a few years later, she met a young Italian serviceman who would become my grandpa at a military dance on the block. They got married, and when he came back from war a few years later, he was wounded, and he had injuries that would stay with him his entire life. He lived till 90. And Martha was 21 when they had Annette, my mom. Baby there in the middle, about 2 years old maybe. Martha, a child herself, child of the Depression and World War II, had my mom. And all of this is to say that I believe Annette was born into a tumultuous timeline. So of course, I don't necessarily know about or understand the significance of, my mother's or my grandmother's upbringing when I was growing up. Not many of us, have the maturity to understand how that impacts how they parent or how we grow. But there are lots of invisible threads that weave their way through generations, right? So I know that who we are, who she is a combination of how we're raised, who taught us, who loved us, who supported us, what they told us. I realize now that my mother told me things that her mother had told her, and my grandmother had heard things from her mother, and so on and so on. And in our family, my mother told me lots of things. Some of them I understood, some of them were a little murkier. But in hindsight and with perspective, I think things are getting a little clearer for me. My mother told me that everything should always be fair. She told me that we shouldn't take more than we could use. She said not everyone had a cottage or family to visit, and not all children got to go to camp or college. Above all else, my mother told me to be thankful, and that we never needed to ask for anything more because we already had enough. And oh, by the way, don't brag about it. I had a lot to say about these momisms when I was younger, and I am reminded quite regularly how when I was in 3rd grade, I had a very long bus ride, and I used that time repeatedly to survey other students about how much soda their parents bought them. And I took those home to prove that my brother and I were being unfairly treated in our home. Another story I hear quite frequently now is about my pet rock, named Rock, that I had. And the running dialogue my pet rock had aloud, of course, listing all of the injustices that we faced, musing on how I wasn't, we didn't go on fancy vacations or get trendy new clothes, too many chores, that kind of stuff. As I grew older, my sense of injustice evolved into something bigger than a child wanting more consumer goods. Based on my teen experiences with things like sexism, nepotism, racism, I began to question the systems that allowed these discriminatory behaviors to exist. I started writing letters to the editor, Tennessee Standard, anybody remember that? About sexism in sports and education. I started investigating stories and printing them in the Chelsea Blueprint about hiring practices and discriminating teachers. I challenged racist bias in my family. All of this while I was in high school here in Chelsea. And I think my mother was flummoxed. At some point she began to tell me other things around sort of the central theme of her not really understanding why I did the things that I did. She started telling me things like she didn't know where I came from and jokingly questioned which of our ancestors I took after. She told me she didn't know where I got my personality or my drive or my interests, sense of purpose. Now, not in a way that you are not my child kind of way, but I think really in a way where she just didn't recognize my behavior in her experience, and therefore, was unsure of what to do with me. So, though she might not have understood me then or now, she's never really tried to talk me out of any of it. She always told me that she was proud of me. Back in my 20s, she did say a lot that she would be there for me if I failed. It bugged me then, it bugged me more. I didn't understand it, but now I sort of look back and think that was her way to encourage the dreams that I had that she didn't understand. That no matter what, she might not understand it, but she had my back. As I became an adult, and it became increasingly apparent that these not like my mother personality traits were indeed part of my permanent makeup, my mother started to use a different phrase, and it became a staple in our dialogue. So literally, she closed almost every conversation that we've had in the last 25 years, whether it was an across the country phone call or a cross-town check-in, with a simple phrase. She would say to me, "Okay, babe, go forth and conquer." So my mother was diagnosed with vascular dementia a few years ago, and we're still learning about how this disease changes lives. For her part, she may not have been involved in the intricacies of my personal or my professional life, but really she hasn't been for some time. However, I think that she understands the gist of me. The things that she's told me through the years have made their way through me to my kids, and I imagine they're gonna make their way through them to their kids. And I hope that they feel like I have their back too, even if I don't understand their dreams. My mom's been a huge influence on me, in all of us, really. And she continues to support us unconditionally with her love. Just looks a little different now. But even with all of this, and she was here last night, she still closes our conversations with "go forth and conquer," which to me means I love you, I am here for you, and I'm proud of you.